Welcome to the Women Writing Podcast. I'm your book coach, Liisa Kovala. I'm an author, accelerator, certified fiction and memoir book coach, and the author of Sister's Winter War, Surviving Struthof, and the upcoming Like Water for Weary Souls. And as a Finnish Canadian, I love my coffee. Take a coffee break with us as we chat about all things writerly with authors and publishing industry professionals. Today's guest on Women Writing is Callista Markotich. She's a former teacher, principal, and superintendent of education in Eastern Ontario, living gratefully with Don, her husband of 60 years, on the shore of Lake Ontario in Kingston, Ontario, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Nations. Her poems have been published in Canadian literary magazines across our beautiful provinces. Her first collection, Wrap in a Big White Towel, published by Frontenac House in 2024, was a finalist for the 2025 Gerald Lampert Memorial First Book Award. Callista's recent work has received Pushcart and National Magazine nominations. She is contributing editor for ARC Poetry. Hi, Callista. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Lisa. How are you?
Great. It's so great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. What are you taking a coffee break from today? Doing any poetry this morning?
I did poetry this morning. I'm working on a manuscript, and I sort of decided that I was going to really mess with the order. Well, that's a big,
Oh,
that's a big one. But I thought I just want to see how these poems resonate with each other. So I took the last draft, I mean
yeah.
the most recent draft, and then I took the beginning poem, which is a prologue poem, and I took the last poem, which is like a bit of an epilogue.
Yeah.
They're like bookends. And then I just I just started going in and putting poems at, behind
Yeah.
behind the prologue, in front of the epilogue. I did about 10 of
Okay.
them. I really don't know whether they work. I think my problem is going to be that I'm going to get to the middle, which is going to
Mhm.
be the end, and there'll be a whole bunch of poems that aren't in there yet.
And then
And
you'll
then
have to
I'll have,
decide whether they stay or go.
I think if
Oh,
that happens, they probably should go. But
maybe they belong in a different collection.
I just think sometimes if you really stir things up,
Yeah.
it's invigorating. It's fun,
Interesting.
and the real work is done. But
Yeah.
you tinker, and then sometimes you see things in a poem that you didn't notice before that have a different resonance. And I have time to do it. So because I'm really lucky, I really do have time for poetry, and
Amazing.
there's nothing lost, and I
Well,
like it.
exactly. So how many poems are you starting with? Like you have poems you've been writing for how long? And then how many do you have?
Oh, well, these, you see, I guess, well, my history with poetry is kind of weird in a way because for many years, friends and I, just a few friends,
Yeah.
had a little group, but it was completely informal. We'd get together, we didn't have a schedule, but it probably ended up being at least once a month. And we'd have a prompt and we'd do our poetry writing there. And then we'd read to each other and we'd say, "Oh, that was really good. That was good." And then we'd, drink wine, and we
Love it.
never really did much with it, but it whetted our instinct to write, but it was more like we were writing kind of like drafts or maybe even pre-writing sometimes.
Yeah.
And but then about, I guess it would be not 10 years ago, my sister died, and that really plunged me into something that really required me to dig very deep. And one of my friends runs a retreat center, and Lorna Crozier was coming to do a retreat. And she had one of the same friends that I had been meeting all these years. And she said, "You have to come." And
Oh,
she is a high-powered person. I usually
yeah.
do what she says anyway. Did go, and then that really changed my practice. I started taking it much more seriously.
Seriously. Amazing.
So,
When did what year was that, would you say?
uh, well, I guess it would,
Years
let
now.
me see, it's maybe, oh golly, I should know that because
That's okay.
It was less than 10 years ago.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And then sometimes it just takes somebody to encourage you and to invite you and to open their arms to you to go, oh, I can do this. Or, oh, like I should actually be paying more attention to this thing I'm doing. Like it's incredible what one person's voice can do for somebody.
Yeah, it was an amazing retreat. And
Yeah.
at the end of it, I just had this compulsion to just do a little better. And the poems weren't all at first about my sister at all, but
Yeah.
just the things that we talked about in that retreat
Yeah.
were, I don't know, it just felt kind of good to go a
Yeah.
bit deeper and, search my soul a bit and get something on paper. And that's when I started writing
Right.
seriously.
Yeah. I have a similar experience. My brother died um 24 years ago now. Not quite. No, that's not right. 1 years ago. And I really started taking my writing more seriously after that. And I wonder if there's something to do with um the finality of it all that like if you don't do these things now. And he was quite a adventurous person, a risk taker. Like he lived life fully. And I thought, oh, I I can do better. I can do more. I can be braver. And I
Yeah.
think there was something about that that encouraged me in a way.
To meet some goals that you could easily put off forever. You wanted to write, I assume, and th
Right.
there is that for sure. But I also think that you are digging, you're going deeper, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you feel that there's more to express than you
Yes.
normally ever do. It's kind of the
Yes.
same thing as what you're saying. There's
Yeah.
adventure there if you reach for it. You
Yes.
can go deeper
Yeah.
in your emotions if you
I
go
think
for it.
so.
And you're there. You're kind of there after a tragedy like
I
that.
think so. You're really, like you say, thinking very deeply about mortality and about loss and grief and I mean all the big life questions and you need to express them. And it's not exactly the time when people want to have those conversations with you, right? Like it's but through writing you can let it pour out.
Right, you can.
And
And
that's really powerful.
that's right. And no one is required to respond
That's right.
openly to you because, as we all know, it's really hard to talk to people that we care about when they're grieving.
That's right.
It's not an easy thing to know what to say to a person grieving,
Yeah.
but if that person writes feelings, you can
Yes.
read them, and in your time, you can understand better how
Right.
they are really experiencing. Because that end of life is just
Yeah.
it's in a category of its own.
It
When
really
you look at
is.
it,
It really is.
yeah,
And it every loss is fresh and different and everyone handles it differently and so I think that is so powerful to have poetry or literature that can express some of those thoughts and we connect with them in our own way. Like it doesn't necessarily mean we had the same experiences, but there is a level of shared humanity there, right?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah,
Amazing, amazing. So
that's right.
before the we pressed record, we were talking about the fact that you were a former teacher, as am I, and you were a principal and superintendent. So you were in the whole realm of teaching. And were you writing poetry at that time, or were like did that come later?
Yeah, yeah, I was, but in the way I described earlier, not
Yeah.
very seriously, but it gave us a lot of pleasure. We really had fun, and it wasn't just the chatting and the wine. It was this
Yes.
idea of creating something.
Yeah.
In fact, in that little group, there were four of us. All of us are writing now more
Yeah.
seriously, but I guess at the time there were just many other things in our lives, families,
Sure.
jobs, like
Yes.
jobs that
Sure.
seem to take up all the time that
Yeah.
you have.
That's
And
right.
yeah, no, I was writing, but like I say, they were just little trickles. But a lot of them have been revised. Sometimes it might only be the little germ of the main idea
Mhm.
that has. come to be a poem that is even in the manuscript. So a lot of those original friends have said, I see stuff in there that we talked about. Those were
Amazing.
some of our prompts.
Yeah, right? So
Yeah,
good. Well,
yeah,
I think the education, I'm sure this is true about other professions, um, but it's so demanding that you need a creative outlet. Like you just need some way to express yourself and be creative and thinking about other things because we could really in education think about curriculum and kids and, day to day all day long. I mean, it's one of those jobs that's very hard to turn off because you always
yeah.
have, some child's problem in your mind, or how are you going to teach this, or how are you going to help that kid with whatever, or what, various things that are happening. It's hard to come home and sort of switch it off. But having a creative outlet kind of allows you to um, go, okay, I'm going to leave that at the door for now, and I'm just going to focus on this other
Right.
thing.
That is certainly true. And the other thing about education, and you know this too, is that there is a lot of writing. I mean, one of my long periods of devotion was to a document called Language Across the Curriculum,
Oh,
but it
yes.
really just meant that there is language.
Hmm.
There is language in science, there is language in math, there's language in every subject. And if the teacher
Yes.
is willing and interested, then there is language in every discipline. And I feel then as an administrator, when I was a principal and when I was a superintendent, that there was so much writing. There
Yes.
were memos and there were policy statements, and then
Endlessly.
there were letters to, a bus driver or a
Yeah.
parent or
Hmm.
or staff. And I do remember that without thinking of poetry, which is now my great love, I always really, really tried to write a good letter.
Yeah.
I always thought the letter has to speak to the person, the intended reader.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's silly. Like, how many times we get form letters that are really like you just, you have to read it, but you really wish you didn't. They don't really speak to you. You might have to read
Yes.
it twice just to even see what it's really saying. And there's no real need for that if the person writing it wants to meet the reader. And
Yeah.
that meant something to me when I was in those roles. And I think that kind of helped a little bit when I wanted to write poetry because not everybody likes to read poetry. They may find that it doesn't speak to them. But I think most poets are trying to speak to the readers, and most poets do speak to their readers. But
Mhm.
it's something that
Yeah,
it's purposeful, you know.
absolutely. And yeah, and I'm thinking back to all of those, a lot of communication in our work. Um, and how often folks aren't really paying attention to who is receiving that message and the tone of it and how it's worded, and that can cause miscommunication. So as writers, it's so important to communicate what you want to say succinctly, but also in that tone that you're trying to capture. Like it's obvious you were paying attention to language and how it was formulated and how what the message that was being conveyed. More concretely than say a lot of folks who will just like spit off an email and send it off and not really think too much about how the intended audience will receive it, which I know I often had to think, oh, I have to reread this email without tone because I thought, oh, because you read it and
I
you think, oh
know,
no,
I
and then
know.
okay, calm down, it's fine.
Right. And they tell us that that people have really kind of changed their reading habits a little bit with email in particular, and that if there's a key message that's really important, that it really needs to be near the top because they don't
Yes,
read the whole thing.
yes,
And that I
yes.
have found that.
Excuse me.
And
Yeah.
but so the reader has changed as well. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
there was a really funny book. It was, I'm sure it was probably a bestseller when I was a young teacher, and it was called Up the Down Staircase. I don't know if I was a young teacher,
Okay.
but when I was teaching anyway, and it was all about the kind of bureaucratic statements that come, in this case, from the office to
Yes.
staff, and And it had a story embedded, which actually was quite a heartfelt story. I think it was verging on tragic somewhere, but
Mhm.
overall, it was comic because they were just so such nonsense. They were just
Yes.
bureaucratic stuff that people take the trouble to write, and they're
Hmm.
just hilarious. And
That is funny. It brings to mind all of those buzzwords over the years, and you see those trends. There's a few years where I guess the board or through the administration are using. During COVID, it was pivot. So the more things were repeated, the
yeah,
more we'd kind of like be annoyed, but also laugh at it because you understand what they mean, but also like, do we need to use that all the time?
yeah,
Yeah. So as I think coming back to poetry, like that's where word choice is so extremely important. I always think novelists and nonfiction writers should spend more time writing poetry because you are having to become very succinct in your language and very purposeful, and every word counts, right? Yeah, it's like it's a whole other level of editing, I guess.
well, I think I'm so impressed by people who write, well, even short stories, full length short stories, novels, that is so much work and it has to be sustained for such a long period of time. Whereas a poem is, well, you can work on a poem for years, really.
Yes.
Oh, you
Mhm.
don't work on it all the time exclusively, but it
Yeah.
could be in your drafts for years.
Yeah.
But it's, overall, it's a small piece that you look at discreetly, whereas the novel with the plot and the character development, that is
Well, they
that.
all have their own set of challenges, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm the same. I admire poets and short story writers. I have written both a little bit of both, but I admire folks who do that because I see the craft like it's just so well. And if it's done well, you don't even see the craft because it's so beautiful. You don't even notice until you pause and go, "How are they doing
Right, yeah.
how are
That's
they doing that in that many words and make me feel this way like so intensely?" It's a phenomenon to me that
it
poets
is.
always just make me feel like, oh, that is, I wish. Yeah, amazing. And
And
sorry, go ahead.
diverse. They're so diverse too. There are
Yes,
so many wonderful poems, and they may be, if you picked your favorite recent 10, they might be completely different,
yes,
completely different in every way.
yeah,
But so there's a lot of diversity possible, but it is always reaching some level of feeling that it
yes.
resonates with me as a reader, that makes me think, oh, that's great.
Right?
That's a wonderful
I know.
poem.
I know.
Yeah.
So good. When you're working on your collection and you have all these poems that you've written over the years and bringing them all together, and so do you start, like I've asked other folks this, but did you start with oh, I'm going to write a poetry collection around a certain theme, or are you going back to all those poems and seeing, okay, what are the threads here? Is that a part of the discovery of it, or are you noticing themes that are sort of similar in them?
Well, when this is the only book this is my first
Oh,
book, and
beautiful.
so far it's my only book.
Mhm.
And when I had been writing for quite a while, well, I don't remember, but I'd started having a few things published and then more things published and a couple of recognitions. I started thinking, I would love to write a book of poetry. It would be like this marvelous dream. But I didn't think I had enough to make poems hang together.
Right.
And at that point, I really thought, I guess maybe someone who really wants to write poetry books would think of a topic, a theme, some content that would cling together.
Mm.
Um, but then I really worked very hard to get an order where I could try to make these poems fit into a book and march away under the same title. But and I finally did it, but it was segmented. There were family, there was kind of like, well, nature. There were things about books I'd read or choir work or something like that. And that's how it was first accepted. But the editor I had who taught me so much, he said, that's not the order. I don't think that order helps your poems. It's very predictable. I think you should take those poems and just try to see if you can get them to resonate in a different way so that there's kind of an arc that runs through your work, but it's not separate and those aren't discrete pieces. And that was a shock and a challenge. It wasn't easy to do, but I did try to do it, and finally, I think it's in a form that works a little bit because if a poem resonates a little bit with the one before it or after it, you do have a reader just kind of the next poem contributes a little bit to their sense of what it is you're getting at, and it can work. But it wasn't easy. So this manuscript that I'm working on now is different. There is a conglomeration of poems that are about an event, but I didn't want to group them. There aren't 50 of them.
Right, right.
There's probably, I don't know, 20, maybe 30, maybe 25. But they all kind of spin off into other events. This is a historic event. It's a storm, actually. And
Mhm.
then, so, but because I don't really have a whole book of poems about that storm that happened in 1913 on the Great Lakes, I've tried to sort of devolve it into other poems that they might share something thematic, or it might even be language. They might share a little bit of language. They might share a word that a reader would notice.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to link them that way. But
That's
right now I'm messing that up anyway, so I don't know.
that's
You
so great.
know.
But that speaks to how amazing a good editor is that they can look at all those pieces with fresh eyes and just see that it needs some kind of other structure. Did that editor give you a sense of how you might do that, or did they just say, okay, go away and try and see if what you can do, or did they have a sense of what might?
Well, he sent me an article that I read. It was an academic article that talked about order, and it was interesting because it didn't. It talked about other orders. One of them was like the Abecedarian, like someone wrote a book which was like that, the ABCs. I thought, well, that'd be easy
Yes.
enough. I mean, in a sense, it would be easy.
Yeah.
You're not really looking for sort of an emotional resonance. There's something that carries along. Now it's my poem that starts with C, you
Yes.
know. But so what I did was open my mind to the fact that there are possibilities.
Yes.
And then after that, I came up with a structure that I thought would work. I didn't spend much time on it, but wrote to him. We couldn't meet. He doesn't live locally, so our work was mostly through email or WhatsApp or on Zoom like this. Or uh, he thought that one was actually breaking it up even a bit more because it was kind of interesting. I hope it doesn't bore anyone else, but a lot of my poems were about what they were like. They addressed a person, and
Mm,
it turned out that just about all those persons were men. Like, for instance, Noah or Jonah or an author. Like, for instance, I wrote something to Michael Crummy at one point. And so I thought, well, why don't I take those poems and then sort of see what other poems might spin off from those topics. But
okay.
he said, you're really going to end up like with even more sort of divisions. But I didn't think he was saying that would never work. I mean,
Mm,
something like that could work
yeah.
possibly,
Yeah.
but he wasn't for separating these out into little clumps.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's something to think about. He was just an wonderful editor, really. A young, I mean, in my young to me, lots of people are young to me. But he, had been writing seriously for such a long time, and he really was very, very helpful.
Yeah, so good. And the fact that now, as you're working through putting this new collection and moving things around, that you're experimenting and thinking about the possibilities and being free to do that, like not feeling like you must do it this way. That's great, right? Because it means you're going to come across um,
Yes.
that order that works for you, and you'll know why you did it.
Yeah.
And that I think is like,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of progress, like that, I think is a big step to be able to look at
It
your own work
is.
in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
but it's interesting because the groups that you work with, I am sure one of the things that just encourages people so much is in a groups like yours, you can run things by people and more than
yes,
one person, and you can
yes,
kind of get a sense. Well, sometimes the sense you get is that some people really think that's great and others don't. So that
right,
is sort of helpful overall because it affirms you that there isn't a one right thing. But
exactly.
it does give you, every time you meet an opinion about your work, it, whether you accept it or don't, it gives you something to muse on as you go forward. And I think
Absolutely.
that must be wonderful in your when you do that with your groups.
Yeah, it's so enlightening because everyone's coming from a different perspective, and the writer is often has an idea of what they're trying to convey, and it's not always landing. So it might be that some of the individuals are can see what they're trying to do, but it's not working. And so just having all those different voices maybe is difficult for some folks if they're new to that, but I think for the most part, people are really encouraged because they think, oh, like, okay, now I can go away and I'll work on this. And I like what you said about when you don't agree with some of the feedback, it doesn't resonate with you, whatever somebody has said about the piece. It makes you pause and say, no, I actually want it this way. Like you can kind of double down on it and feel confident that you're making a good choice for you. Maybe
Mhm.
not for every reader because you can't do that, but for yourself. So yeah, sometimes the that kind of criticism will help you
Yeah.
decide,
Yeah.
okay, no, I really like this, but that other thing, yeah, I can work with that. I can play with that and see what I
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
That's right.
having diverse voices is really important, I think, at some stage. I don't know that it's always necessary really early on. Depends.
I guess it depends. Yeah, I guess it depends. It could be discouraging, but I do think the multiplicity of views is usually
Yeah.
helpful because
Yeah.
it doesn't tie you down. I mean, you
Yes.
may think, well, I'm really sorry that these people didn't really think that was a good way to go, but these people did. Now let me think about what they said and weigh that out, see if
Yes.
it has any merit in my mind, but often it will bring about a change, maybe not the change that those critics might have
Right.
expected.
Right.
Add, add an improvement sometimes,
Yeah.
like things can.
And I imagine in your small poetry group that you had, um, that it was a supportive and uplifting group. Like, were there? I don't. We don't want to point fingers at anyone, but um, I think groups work well if everyone's intention is to lift up the writer, right?
Yeah,
Like if we're all on the same page about where, and that, but also like it's about the pages. It's not about the person. Like
yeah,
we're not criticizing the writer. We're looking at the pages and we all want it to do well. Like we all want it to move forward. And then if we all have that sense. So did
yeah.
you find that with your poetry group that it must have
That
sustained
that
everyone?
that particular poetry group was not that serious, really. I don't
Yeah.
remember us ever really talking about um, major improvements or
It
revision.
was
But but the po but now I'm with a really tiny poetry group. It's one other poet. It started out being two, and they were in my past group too, but now the hat that they wear is more serious. And we
okay.
do, we really do work hard on each other's work, in the sense that we we usually know what their goal is, what their aim is. Is this almost ready to go out? Are we going to submit this one?
Right.
Let's talk about the title. We always start with somebody else's poem, a poem that we like. We each bring one. So we have two poems. We call them our master's poem, our master poems.
Mhm.
I'm sure there are a lot of poets that would love to know that their poem
Yeah.
is a
They
master.
would. They would.
And, yeah, and there we look at how they did it, how what we look at everything. We look at line endings, we look if there's a form, if there isn't, how they may have decided to end their lines,
Yeah,
what the stanchion is, if there's rhythm, the language, diction, everything. And that's all such that's such a teachable
so
experience.
good.
And we do that. And then with our own, we don't really like it's already done. So we look at all those things. We talk about each other's work. We have a lot of trust between ourselves. So we don't have a problem if we need to say, I wonder, that part there that I found distracting or, anything like that. But I think we build that up as we go through our master poems and just by the fact that we've known each other for
For sure.
years.
Yeah, and there's trust there, and yeah, that I think that's important for folks who are maybe starting out, whether they're poets or novelists or short story writers or what nonfiction, um, that it can evolve, that you can have a group that is purely just let's write and drink wine and enjoy it and have fun and no pressure and just have a lovely time, and then also know that when and if somebody wants to get more serious about the work, it is a good idea to have a group or at least another writing partner who can level it up, and because you need to at some point go beyond this is so good.
Yeah,
Like we all want to hear that, but it's not that helpful.
I know we
So
go
good.
good. And then, and they were for what
Yes.
we were doing at the time. Not any of
Yes.
us ever thought we didn't submit anything. We didn't do that. But but there was like years of, I think you would probably call them first drafts, really.
Yeah.
And the fact that we didn't do them, progress with each one then, that all that drafting, all that talking, all that thinking of how to word something was probably quite formative.
So formative.
It took a
Just practicing craft, playing with craft, like it's so important. And I think that's important too for folks to understand. It's not, oh, I've decided to be a poet and I'm going to publish a poetry book. Like, it's years of building craft and learning and building a skill set. It's extraordinarily difficult in some ways, but not impossible. Not to suggest like people shouldn't go and do it. You should go. Everyone should go and do it. If you want to be a poet or you want to write, do it. I think you can learn, but it's not an overnight thing. I don't think. I think people work on craft for years. Like most writers I know started writing as children.
yeah.
Were you writing as a child?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was. I remember around grade, I don't know, 3 or 4, I told a teacher that I wanted to be a writer. And
amazing.
um, it was in a school that was a bilingual school. He was probably not a speaker of English, and couldn't speak French. And he said, "You want to write on it? You want to write on a book? You want to write on a book?" I said, "No, I want to write a book." I felt like he was completely confused that somebody would want to write a book, and how would you do that anyway? Like, write on a book,
Right.
maybe. And I think I confused him and he confused me. And I have always thought, boy, it must be just like such an incredible thing to write a book. And in fact, it is.
Yes.
It's a lot of work.
Yes.
It's so speculative, every single page. You really don't know until it reaches a reader whether it will. And sometimes, as they say, you have to kill your darlings. You have a line that you think is just so great, and somebody else goes, "Ugh,
Yeah.
get that out of there. Do you need that? End it before that line."
Mhm. Yes.
And, it's because we're writing in isolation. Our brain is rolling along and being very, very coy, very smart, very clever, and then it
Yes.
just doesn't necessarily speak to another person at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it would have been so lovely if you could just pass that book on to that teacher. If you could have seen that, that would have been an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, it was really.
Somewhere that teacher knows, they know.
We had a teacher in the same school that I just loved, and that was grade 5 because I remember it. And every day right after lunch, she read to us from a novel. It was a book called Trap Lines North. One of them was. Then when that was finished, there was another one and another one, but that's the one I really remember the most. And it wasn't just me. The kids just loved coming in after lunch to hear that book. And it strikes me still how much kids love
Yeah,
to be read stories.
for sure.
I don't know if today's teacher feels that she or he really has the time for it because the curriculum's quite compressed. And
Mhm.
some people might think, well, all they're doing is listening. But I mean, that, as we know,
Oh,
is a huge skill that many
huge.
people could probably practice quite readily.
Absolutely. That and just the I remember our teacher reading to us as well. And actually I remember in about grade 3 or 4, I was asked to read to the class while the teacher was probably marking. Now I know that the teacher just needed somebody to read so that they could go mark. Okay. But at the time I was very pleased because I was a good reader. So I would sit in front of the class and read. And but even like as listening to stories, how it sparks imagination, how it, and you enter different worlds. And so those of us who, became writers or other artists, I feel like that is, fundamentally a thing we need is storytelling and to hear somebody's voice and to hear those stories written by their people. And yeah, so shout out to all the educators out there who are
Yeah,
who are continuing those traditions because you're right, the curriculum is so stuffed, but we also have to have those moments of like time for kids to read it, whether on their own or to them, and time to write. I always integrated time for a little bit of creative writing at the beginning of the class because kids don't know they can write until they start writing, and
that's right.
let them write what they like. Okay, we have to learn how to write an essay, but how about we just play for a little while too?
Yeah.
And it's freeing, and kids, they have it in them. They need to express themselves.
They do. They do. Like I know that there was a long period of time when our board and I think other Ontario boards were really keen to try to, well, instill the idea that writing is a process. And
Mhm.
I remember as a teacher thinking, all my life as a student, I never remember anyone really telling me that or talking to the class about it, that a draft is just a draft, it's just for you, you're trying to get down what you want to say, and
Mhm.
then the really big work starts later. But a draft isn't to be corrected by a teacher or anybody else, it's to be worked on by the writer. And that kids would find that really well, just kind of encouraging because, if they thought that they were going to put something down on paper and then it was going to be marked and
Right.
there would be spelling mistakes. I mean, they even encouraged invented spellings in the small grades because that is, writing is sort of the inverse of reading. That they learn that way. That's how they learn.
Yeah.
But that was pretty foreign, in earlier times. And I not don't know what they're doing right now. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not sure what's happening at the elementary level anymore. I'm so out of touch with that, but certainly at the secondary level, at least where I was teaching, there was so much encouragement of writing process and drafting and revising and um, peer editing and
Yeah.
just seeing something evolve because I mean, some kids just want to write it and hand it in because now I'm done. But then they're so proud of the work they've done when they go through all the steps and kind of get to the other side and go, oh, I'm pretty good. This is
I
pretty
know.
good. And it is. And
Yeah.
it's incredible. So So important. But that just is very similar to what we do as writers now. Like it's maybe we don't follow every step like in order the way we teach it, but we're still kind of going through those motions, right? Drafting and like you say, working with somebody to read and edit and discuss it and making changes and looking at it again and maybe putting it aside for a while. And that's the real work of writing.
Yes, yeah. And if kids realize they have the freedom to draft something and then start revising it, and the freedom and the time, I don't know, like it's time consuming as we know. And then have an editor, someone who will help you so that you're handing it in with no spelling mistakes and your punctuation is going to be correct. Those are the things the reader needs. And
Yeah.
like really means that any kid can come up with a finished piece if all the process is attended.
Process
I think
attended
it's
to.
brilliant.
Yeah, that's true.
But like everything else, I mean, kids are rushed. They're rushed and
Right?
teach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
And I don't know what, I mean, I'm sure it's very different now
Mhm.
with all kids having laptops that they work with, which is a good thing. And most of them after a certain grade have cell phones, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
But it's changed things
It
though.
absolutely
So
has.
like my saying all this might be completely different the way the kids are going to perfect themselves if they do.
For
But there
sure.
will be process. There's no
There,
question
yeah,
about
absolutely. There's always the process. Um, I'm just thinking about the next step in the process. So you have a poem done, it's been edited, you've talked about it with your writing partner, you've polished it, and then it doesn't stay on your computer or on your notebook. You send it out.
that.
Can you talk about that process and how that is for you? Some people love it and send out a ton of things, and some people are, have more trepidation.
Well, I think when I'm working on a book, I tend to not send things out as much, which is, there's no reason for that. I should probably do it more. It's just that I'm not engaged that way. And you have to almost stop, when you're going to submit something, you have to stop everything else and take a look at that poem or those poems. And then you have to take a look at the guidelines where you want to send. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be making it sound that onerous. It's a different kind of work,
Mhm.
and it's an interruption from the work I love to do.
Yeah.
I haven't, but I like, well, when I first started, I'm embarrassed to say I had almost no poetry books that I owned,
Mm.
and I didn't subscribe to a magazine. I don't think I could have named you literary magazine. Maybe, yeah, maybe Prism and maybe Walrus but I didn't know anything. So at first I entered a few contests because then you get a free subscription.
Right.
It's about the same cost as a subscription, but you got to submit your poem and it meant someone was going to read your poem. And I did okay on in that. And then then I would get the subscription. So now I've got like books full of and I can't resist a new collection that I read about. So I
Of
buy
course.
it. And so, I just I forget what your question was now.
Oh, yeah, no, I love it. I love that I mean, and I think that's the case for a lot of folks.
Oh,
You don't know
submission.
about all the different
Yeah.
publications. And then when you start to get into it, you're like, oh, look at all this magic out there. So
Oh,
good.
and then so really it's so worth it. And I know a lot of people and the rejections, I actually thought for a while that I would not be able to do it
Mm,
because I thought I'm not going to be able to accept rejections. It's just going to disappoint me too much.
mm.
And I was surprised how little I was disappointed. I mean, there's no question. It's the first couple of acceptances I had, I was just beside myself. I'm going to have a poem in a magazine. Oh my God. And I have a friend who up the street who published a book well before I did, and maybe more, and she's a poet, but she said, don't think it's going to change your life to publish a book. Change your life. You're still the same person. But at the time I thought, no, but there's something so great about that. But you have to get used to rejections when you
Mhm.
submit. But I think the biggest problem for most writers might be just that they're on a roll with poems, and to submit, you totally draw back from that. It's sort of like that right brain, left brain
Yeah.
lit. You're doing a different task altogether.
Mhm.
But it keeps on sort of flipping over the edge from one to the other, because when you're getting ready to send it, well, you're reading it again. And then you're changing an "ah" to a "da." And then you're saying that's not the best line ending. And then you're back into the revision. And like it's good work, but it's an interruption.
It is, yeah, it is a different kind of work. It is a very, I think it also is very time consuming because everyone wants it submitted in a different way and a different format and font size and. And so you want to be exact in how you're submitting your work. And so it takes time to do all that and time taken away from the creative part that
The
you
creative
probably
part's
love.
definitely the most fun. I actually think revising a first draft is probably the most fun of all.
Yeah.
I love doing it. But I should say, like, for submissions, if the journal uses Submittable, it is pretty easy,
Oh,
really.
good.
Yeah, it's pretty
Those
easy.
portals are great. Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
and you can track it. A lot of magazines take a long time to get back to, but you just forget about them and submit some more. I would say that it's really good for us poets to submit stuff. It
Yeah.
makes us do our best. It makes us read it the way we think an editor will read it. Um,
And I think it probably also helps to have that track record of poems that have been published so that when you're ready with a first collection, that you're going in to pitch with sort of a little resume of things you have
yeah,
already done. There's
yeah.
something that allows them to see your work as more professional, maybe, or I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's probably great for a literary CV to have
Yes,
pieces
it is. It is, and
published.
most of them, there's an acknowledgement page usually at the end that lists the ones that have been published or been awarded or any received any kind of accolades that you can mention. And I think I don't know how the acquisition editors go about it, but I would imagine that they probably take that into consideration, because it just means that some other editors like that stuff.
Yes, sure.
And it's kind of an affirmation that you know, people like this stuff. And so it's already reached a certain level of acceptance. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean, though, that if you have never, done anything, you have to start somewhere.
that's right.
You might start and be famous right off the bat, but
That's right.
I don't think it usually happens that way.
Probably not too often, but occasionally I'm sure there's some magic bullet out there that just works
Yeah.
for somebody.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
rule it
absolutely.
out.
Yeah, you just never know, right? But I think that is good advice. Just keep submitting, keep submitting. And I think the other thing for submissions, I know this is true about fiction and nonfiction. For folks who want to join some organizations, they often need three pieces published somewhere at least. I don't know if that's true of everyone, but I think like Writers Union, I think still needs three, and I don't know if the
Canadian
poetry
poets.
organization.
Yeah, the Canadian poets, I think I'm not sure. It's at least a publication anyway,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's too onerous.
Yeah, yeah, a couple anyways to get yourself in those organizations, which of course have great resources and community and all the things that folks need. So yeah, that I feel the same way about submitting. I I sometimes make myself a goal. I will submit something once a month, and I get through January, February, maybe March, and then it's like, oh, I'm focused on the novel
Okay,
again.
I'll do four in February. That'll be all right.
Yeah.
Like do the same. Well, I didn't do that this month, but next month I'll double up. And
Yes, of
I
course.
haven't been just lately, but
Yes.
I always mean to. I always have it on my list.
Yes, me too. And it's and something always takes precedence, but that's okay too, I suppose. So you're working on putting together your collection, getting it organized, and in the meantime, while you're doing that work, are you also writing fresh material for this or something else?
Well, I would just, yeah, I am, but I just wrote a new piece recently because I decided to change the order, and I felt like it ended sort of abruptly. So I have a sort of an epilogue poem because I
Okay.
had a prologue poem, and I thought, well, why not do that? And then that will kind of just round off the ending. So that's a new poem. And it didn't take me very long, which sort of makes me worried because I usually do spend a long, but I don't spend it all at once. But
Right.
every time I look back, I see things that could probably improve, which is good. And because it's not onerous to work on your own work. I mean, I guess that's human nature, but we usually like our own work. So I think
True.
this is pretty good. I'm going to work on this a little.
Yes.
And so that's new.
Mm.
And then before that, I would say over the summer we were very busy with a lot of things that had nothing to do with my sitting in my desk at my desk. But I think I did come up with about two new poems
Nice.
be over the spring and summer, and then this one. So that's only three.
Mm.
But when you're busy trying to work on a collection and the poems you think are there, um, it's maybe a little counterproductive to go off into a
Right.
new area. But I did think if I get this off my table, I have no poem, very few poems about education, and it
Ah,
struck me odd. I thought, why not? It was it's such a profession. You know this, and your husband does too, that is a hugely influential thing to be
absolutely.
doing with young people. If your husband is a music teacher, I bet there are kids whose lives he has changed.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely. There's
here.
definitely students who have gone on to study music and who have made careers of it, and
Right?
others who have, gone into other careers but have still maintained a connection to the musical community. So, yeah, you just don't know what influence you have on
You don't.
folks until years later, if they even tell you, which is
That's
always joyful when they come up to you later and say, you know what, I really loved your class, or it
I
really
know.
helped me with whatever. That is just, it's somewhat like when a book is out in the world and it's out in the world, you don't know who's reading it, but
Oh,
then
yeah.
when somebody reads it and comes back and says something to you,
I
it's
know.
it's like that feeling I get when a former student comes to me.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? Like, it's so
I know.
lovely.
Isn't that great? It truly is great. And
Mhm.
I think teachers often don't realize that because there's a lot of like hurly burly all day long. You don't really have time to realize,
That's right.
but
Yeah,
it's a very important profession.
it
And
really is. And yeah, that would be amazing if you wrote about some of those experiences, and
so that might
it
be
would connect with folks for sure. Mhm.
that might be the one where it does have a one theme.
Yes. Well, you never know, right? Yes.
So much there is so much
Much.
because when it's a full workplace, as you know,
Yes.
there are colleagues, there are students, there are
Mhm.
parents, there are bus drivers.
Yes.
There's all of the questions about
All of,
assessment,
yeah,
curriculum,
yeah, all of
and
that.
all
And
of
just it's like a microcosm of life. Like, you have every kind of individual from every background, and like in a classroom, it can be so diverse, and you have all the emotions, like at that age, quite charged emotions at times. You
yeah,
see all the things, all the emotions, all the doubts, all the second guessing, all the, first loves, all the things happen
Yeah,
in
all
front
of
of
it.
you.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a lot that is hard hitting. There's really a lot that could be comic too in a certain
yes,
way, though
that's
I haven't
true.
really tried my hand at very many poems that are comic, but I think it could be done.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah, I
sure.
don't like, you know, knee slapping comic,
No,
but
but yeah, for sure. Well,
uh,
I think that would be a wonderful collection. You should get right on that because you're not busy enough.
no, I'll do that when I get this one done.
Yeah, sure. Just like that's amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Kingston Writers Festival in a couple weeks. So when this airs, it'll be later in the fall. So we'll have hopefully already met in person.
I
So
hope
that
so.
will be really nice. Yeah,
I'm
I'm
going
looking
to
forward
look
to the
for you.
festival.
I'll look for your session. I'll look it up in the program right now.
Excellent. Yes.
My poetry session is on the second day through the
Okay.
noon hour. I think it's
Excellent.
maybe at noon and goes till 3, which is
Amazing.
kind of good because my two of my daughters are teachers, and I have two school age kids,
Yeah.
our grandchildren, high
Mm,
school age, that might make it if it
amazing.
starts in the noon hour. So yeah,
Yes,
I really
perfect.
look forward to meeting you there, Lee.
Yeah, you too. And I really want to thank you for your time today, taking a coffee break with me. And you're just a delight to chat with. And I'm looking forward to your poetry collection, the next one, and perhaps a teacher one down or an educational themed one down the road.
Yeah, thank you very much. You too.
So great.
It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Thanks. Are you interested in pursuing your book writing dreams? Join me for my next group book coaching session starting on October 19th and running for 8 weeks. This session is ideal for individuals who have an idea for a novel or a memoir and need guidance to get started, or who have a draft and need a solid plan for revision. You will receive weekly group book coaching sessions and individual feedback every week on your submissions, weekly goal setting, and a supportive community of women writing. Hop on over to lisakovalabookcoach.com for more information or email me at lisabookcoach@gmail.com to register. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to have a coffee break with us at Women Writing. Don't forget to subscribe to Women Writing on Substack. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs a writing break and a little inspiration. Happy writing! Thank you to Michael Jensen for his original music and editing, and to Mia Jensen for the logo design.